Hey, thanks for tuning in to a comic book commentary video. Today, looking at X-Men Elsewhen, Volume 1. John Byrne is back, baby. Well, sort of. Let's check it out. Okay, X-Men Elsewhen by legendary comic book creator John Byrne. Is John Byrne back? Well, no, he's actually not back. This is kind of his swan song. John Byrne, as most people know, was the penciler for the X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, back from 1978 to 1981. The book famously was facing cancellation in the mid 70s. The book was on a bi monthly status. And then things changed. They introduced new characters, a new team, some new creators. Lynn Wein was on the book with Dave Cockrum, and then Chris Claremont took the book over. Dave Cockrum was still the artist until issue 108 when John Byrne took over, and the rest is history. John Byrne would last all the way up to issue 143, and then he would leave sometime early 1981. And what this is basically John Byrne's fan fiction of, you know, Marvel Comics has that what if comic book. Well, this is what if John Byrne had not left the X-Men after the Dark Phoenix saga. And this is where this book picks up, is immediately after the Dark Phoenix saga. This would be before Days of Future Past and all of those epic storylines. So says legendary comic book creator John Byrne returns to the characters whose adventures he first steered to artistic greatness nearly 5 decades ago. Yes, 5 decades, and we're still hardcore X-Men fans are still clamoring for John Byrne stuff. Now, some of the creators that came after John Byrne, Dave Cockrum came back on the book for about a year, and then he left. The artist that came in shortly after him was Paul Smith. Paul Smith was only on the book for about a year, and then he took off to much of the fans' dismay, including mine. But I was in seventh grade when John Byrne left the X Men, and I remember it to this day. It was not a happy time because X Men had become my basically my first go-to book when I would go to the grocery store with my mom, and she would buy me some comic books off the spinner rack. Um, X-Men starting in about 19 middle 1978, late 1978 became my number one priority go-to book. It currently had been Spider-Man, the Avengers, and the whole Fantastic Four, but the X-Men, after reading a few of the Byrne Claremont X-Men, uh, soon I was the first thing I would look for was on the spinner rack at the grocery store were these was issues from that famous X-Men run. So X-Men Elsewhere Volume 1 is the first of a three-volume series of new adventures featuring the X-Men written and drawn by the Eisner Hall of Fame creator. But more than just a return to the series, he helped bring to prominence through much beloved and influential storylines like the Dark Phoenix saga and Days of Future Past. This is a one-of-a-kind tale like no other. And it says down here, Elsewhere envisions a universe of stories as though Byrne never left the title in 1980, with one major difference leading all the stories that follow. Here, Jean Grey did not sacrifice herself for the good of the universe. Rather, she survived her experience as Dark Phoenix, and neither she nor the team nor the Marvel universe will ever be the same. So, let's I'm not going to go through the entire book. Like I said, it's there's going to be 3 volumes of this. uh this covers 10 issues. Each one's going to cover 10 issues, and I had downloaded the penciled pages from John Byrne's website back in 2023. Um, John Byrne had started in here. John Byrne has an introduction that he from the summer of 2025 that he's written here for the book. Um, it says, first, a few words of clarification. What you hold in your hands is not a project begun for Marvel Comics and ultimately rejected by them, as some on the internet believe. Far from it. This is a very personal project. So, this is John Byrne having fun. This is John Byrne saying, what if I could have continued the storyline being the writer and the artist on the book instead of Chris Claremont? You know, the two famously had some creative differences that uh, ult- ultimately led to John Byrne leaving the book. So I'm not going to get on. You can. It's been well chronicled their creative differences that began to form in 1980. So, but this is John Byrne saying that he's had more fun with this project, basically a fanfic for himself, than almost anything he's ever done in his 50 plus years in the business. And he says, "Hope the same holds for you." So I remember when I learned that John Byrne was scanning penciled pages on his website. It's basically a message board called johnbyrnerobotics.com. Man, I rushed to it and had to figure out how to download it. And he finally had a link on his website to how to download these rough penciled pages, but they were still beautiful. So the book starts out with a little bit of a flashback on exactly how Jean Grey became the Phoenix, and I believe this uh, all of this takes place in X-Men 101. It's got that really cool famous cover of Jean Grey coming up out of the river and or out of the lake, and I am Phoenix. So yeah, it John just does a quick penciled just a quick, beautifully penciled recap of the events. It's only a couple pages. He doesn't go into a big long backstory exposition here. If you're a fan of the X Men, you're pretty well aware of this of what happens here. So, X Men Elsewhen by John Byrne and introducing Paul Wills. I'm assuming Paul Wills is doing the inking. Yeah, inker Paul Wills. Colorist is Laverne Kad- Kanzierski, Leonard O'Grady, and Ruth Redmond. So it starts out immediately after the events that unfolded in the Dark Phoenix saga. It says the moon, specifically the mysterious surface featured known as the Blue Area. All is silent now, but mere hours ago, these ancient ruins echoed with the sounds of battle, a battle the X Men lost. Yes. In the Dark Phoenix saga, uh, Lalandra of the Shi'ar Empire, uh, they had basically gave a ultimatum to the X Men: hand over Jean Grey, because as being possessed by the Dark Phoenix entity, she was too dangerous to exist in the universe. She was destroying worlds. So the X-Men weren't going to go out without a fight. So uh they invoked some sort of Shi'ar ancient ritual um that they could battle. They could basically battle for the life of their friend, and the Imperial Guard of the Shi'ar Empire is just too powerful for the X Men, but they gave it their best shot. But yeah, it was basically a good old fashioned butt kicking. And toward the end of the battle, Jean Grey was starting to lose control to the Dark Phoenix entity. So she basically sacrificed herself and destroyed herself with a laser turret. And the X-Men came back home. Cyclops was distraught and he ended up leaving the team for a while. So this is just and now the victors are returning the vanquished to Earth. So nothing is said about Jean Grey being, Jean Grey's still alive here. You can see Cyclops is holding her, but there's a discussion here with Lilandra. They have a little secret here. They're not letting on. They're not sharing with the X-Men and Charles Xavier exactly what is going on. They know something. Um, Said, "It is done, Majesty, but now what are we to do with the entity in our custody? If it is but a fraction as powerful as we fear, it is that and more, old friend." So they've extracted the Dark Phoenix entity from Jean Grey and sent Jean Grey back to Earth, the X-Men. So the story jumps forward 2 months later. So the X-Men are just basically trying to get back to normal. But let's just uh let's just enjoy some of the art here. Of course, we don't have Terry Austin doing the inking anymore, and a lot has been said about the quality of John Byrne's penciling with Terry Austin and without Terry Austin. Um, I love John Byrne's penciling, no matter who's inking him. This to me looks beautiful. I like it. It's on a matte, kind of a matte finish. It's not on a glossy finish. It looks a little bit more like old school comic book to me, and I really like that. But I love this picture here. They're all crammed into the Lockheed Jet cockpit here. There's a mysterious radiation signal coming from the Savage Land, and over the 2 month period, Xavier has been training Kitty on kind of how to operate Cerebro a little bit. He's trying to incorporate her more in like a leadership role into the team. So they travel back to the Savage Land. Savage Land is a awesome storyline that happened in 1978 X-Men. Basically, it's known as the X-Men World Tour, where they go to Antarctica, they battle Magneto in a volcano, and then they barely escape the volcano. The X-Men get separated. Parts of the team think the other part of the team is dead, and so on. And then they kind of gather in the Savage Land and they fight Garok, the kind of a god entity that's trying to take over the Savage Land. And they team up with Kazar and his big saber tooth cat Zabu. It's an awesome storyline. They finally leave the Savage Land. They go back to they go back to the United States. And in traveling, they have to stop by Japan and fight Moses Magnum, and then they go to Muir Island in Scotland and they battle Proteus. It's just a whirlwind run of comic books that, in my mind, has never been surpassed. I remember getting all of it's what got me hooked on the X-Men as a kid. Here I am, 10-year-old kid, and I can't wait to get to the grocery store with my mom so she can buy these issues. And it was the first ones I would pick up off of the spinner rack back in the day. Those were some good memories. So anyway, Wolverine's Kitty Pryde's acting up a little bit. Wolverine's not having it. Wolverine trips her and she panics and she phases through the bottom of the jet while they're over the Savage Land. Here's Nightcrawler teleporting out to try to get her, but she's still trying to understand her powers, trying to control her phasing powers. Now remember, this is before Days of Future Past. Days of Future Past doesn't happen in John Byrne's Elsewhen continuation of the X-Men. Now the Hellfire Club did happen. The Hellfire saga did happen, where Mastermind was trying to take over Jean Grey's mind, and that's when he didn't realize the he was stirring the Dark Phoenix entity that was within Jean Grey. So here's we have Nightcrawler teleporting. Uh, she phases right through his hands and she falls into the foliage down here. And this cool little picture of Nightcrawler looking for her. So the X-Men, oh, and Colossus isn't happy. There's a budding relationship going on with Colossus and Kitty Pryde. Um, and this is still the because Kitty's still new to the team at this point, but Chris Claremont really dives into that relationship later on with some twists and turns. Um, One thing about Chris Claremont I wanted to say, I love Chris Claremont. Claremont and Byrne are my favorite creative team. If you throw Terry Austin in there as well, that helps. But going back to the Iron Fist comic book from 1976, or the Marvel team up run that Chris Claremont and John Byrne. It's always been my all time favorite tandem. Like they've been called the Paul McCartney and John Lennon of comic books, and that's a pretty good analogy, I think. But here we see Colossus getting mad, like, Wolverine, what have you done? Because Wolverine tripped her, said, "Sit down, brat," and Storm's trying to play peacekeeper here. And Cyclops is just hold tight, everybody. I'm going to execute an emergency turn. But my point about Chris Claremont, later on after Byrne left the book, um, I still was a hardcore X-Men fan, but a little bit of the luster had come off for me. Now, Paul Smith coming on in 1983 really helped boost my interest again. Not nothing against Dave Cockrum. I love Dave Cockram's art, but it's just not quite John Byrne in my mind. But Chris Claremont kind of took the stories a little too far the other way with less action and a little bit more soap opera. He almost kind of went a little too far, like exploring the characters, like the normal day to day life of the characters. I like a balance of that. Don't get me wrong, but I still get comic books to see fights and action and you know uh, major conflict. Uh, I don't always want to see Storm and Kitty out on the town. Half of the issue out on the town walking around, talking about their problems and stuff like that. A little bit of that's fine, but you got to have the balance. To me, John Byrne's writing brings way more of that balance than Chris Claremont. So, but in all fairness, some people like that. Some people like the more soap opery type of storyline, and that's fine. I'm just saying, and what draws me to comic books is always the action first. Now they like previously, in the last time that they visited the Savage Land, they run across Kyle Lycos, who is Sauron. He's looking in bad shape here, and I guess there's another threat in the Savage Land. There's always something. There's always someone trying to use the Savage Land in one of their schemes. So now, one of the twists here with the story, and I'm not going to spoil everything. I'm just going to go through a few more pages just to try to get you a little bit of preview of the book. Uh, Jean Grey is basically no longer with the team. She has been sent back with her parents, and when the Shi'ar Empire, whatever technology they use to extract the Dark Phoenix or suppress the Dark Phoenix entity, they actually, according to them, they actually extracted it. They have the entity in custody. Uh, but it sort of reverted Jean Grey back to like the mentality of a child, and specifically a five. She's got the intellectual capacity of a 5 year old. But Charles Xavier, along with Lilandra of the Shire Empire, in the book, say that in time she will return to normal. But they're not seeing. It's been months and months now, and they're not seeing any sign of improvement. You said she might show some natural progression here in familiar surroundings, but she's still showing the apparent intellectual capacity of a 5 year old, a very bright 5 year old. That's her sister. That's Jean Grey's sister. And it says, but for now, all we can do is wait and pray now back to the savage land. And you see Kitty phasing through the ground phasing through the ground of the Savage Land. To her surprise, she runs into a tunnel, a man-made tunnel. So, what is the new threat? The threat of the Savage Land. You get a little hint of it right here in this panel. Says, "Who are you?" And she's like, "Who?" And she's absolutely shocked at the sight of this, of whoever this is. So they're on the X-Men are on the I love this panel of her phasing, trying to concentrate and trying to phase through this this screen here, this metal screen out of the tunnel. But the X-Men are searching for Kitty Pryde, and they run across some hovercraft, some aircraft. So something you're not expecting to see in the Savage Land. And what do you think of this coloring? I'm really impressed with the look of this. It's got an old school feel to it, and that's really what I was wanting when I saw these penciled pages. I was hoping that they didn't like go really modern looking with them if they were ever going to publish them. And I was shocked when I even heard that this book was being published. But I'm really impressed with the inking job and the coloring job. I like this. I like this old school look, but it's still, you know, it's still bright and vibrant. And here we are with Wolverine. Wolverine has some history with old Sauron. I love this. Sauron is like Dr. Lycos is transforming into back into Sauron, and I love this. He slashes Wolverine with the claws. And him and Wolverine, him and the X-Men tangled. Sauron has a ability to hypnotize you, and Cyclops here is, hey, wait, don't be careful, don't let him make eye contact with you. And we don't know if Storm in her anger and her haste here, while she's powering up her her electricity, if she heard the warning from Cyclops or if she remembered the last meeting. Uh, because Storm was kind of taken out of the fight early, um, in the first encounter they had with Sauron in the Savage Land. Sauron needs to drain energy, and Sauron came up from behind her in the last encounter and kind of knocked her out by draining her energy. So she really wasn't part of the fight. So I'm not so sure that she understands Sauron's hypnotic ability. And it's like his eyes, and it takes less than a single heartbeat. And then Wolverine, now she's seeing illusions of the X-Men in monstrous form attacking her, when in actuality it's just Wolverine. So, and Cyclops basically brings him down with an optic blast here. But yeah, this is the old school X-Men, X-Men action. John Byrne's going back to the well here. He knows what the readers want, uh, and he's delivering. He's going back to the basics here. So now we've revealed the threat going on. This is Modoc, and I like how John Byrne is drawing Modoc with his like a decrepit looking face. This is a Modoc I can really I can get behind. Some iterations of Modoc they kind of turn it into like a parody character, and I prefer this horrific looking, almost demonic looking Modoc. So it turns out Modoc and AIM are invading the Savage Lands. So we've got some Jack Kirby inspired tech here. John Byrne is really heavily borrows from Jack Kirby. He has stated that when it comes to drawing tech. So the X-Men continue. Oh, I love this. I love this panel of Storm here. This is great. And you see Modoc. doing a psychic blast here, like a area of effect attack on the X-Men, some kind of hypersonic attack. I feel like my skull is going to burst, Nightcrawler says. So the X-Men are basically taken captive by Modoc and AIM. Advanced idea mechanics. So anyway, skipping ahead here, John Byrne throws a little bit of humor. The X-Men foil. The X-Men get, with the help of Colossus, the X-Men get loose and foil Modoc's plan here. We have this huge explosion, and then Colossus is like red hot here from the heat from the explosion that he's absorbed with his osmium armor. And we've got a little bit of humor here where Wolverine's standing there with no clothes on, and they're like, "Oh boy, cover up." And Kitty is Cyclops is Cyclops or Colossus is covering up Kitty's eyes here. You're a little too young to be seeing this. So it goes back. It goes back to the first issue ends with them going back to the Shi'ar Empire here. So issue two or chapter two, whatever you want to call it, you see the Sentinels. I like John Byrne's rendition here of the Sentinels. He's made the face. He's made the faces in this look a little bit more human, just a little bit more human looking. But I love this. I love this look of the Sentinels. So basically, John Byrne is just revisiting a lot of the classic storylines. He's kind of a continuation of some of the great storylines. I love this Sentinel, this picture of the Sentinel. That to me is and the you see inside of the mouth. That to me is what the Sentinel should look like. It looks very imposing and threatening. Let's go ahead and let's skip ahead a little bit. Ah, a little bit of spoiler here. We see Henry Gyrich from he was the government Avengers liaison back in the late 70s. Around 77, I think he was introduced into the Avengers. He was the go he was the liaison that this is basically that the start of the storyline that ultimately led into the Civil War storyline for the Avengers. But basically, the Avengers were going to have to answer to the government, and Henry Gyrich was the liaison between them, and there was no love lost between Gyrich and the Avengers. But why is Gyrich here with Sebastian Shaw of the Hellfire Club? What is going on here? So Byrne is really he's Burns really reaching into the grab bag to bring back the some of the old storylines, some of the successful storylines that they're still making movies about decades and decades later. So, but you do see later on in the book, you do see some Fantastic Four, the Avengers. The Avengers come in with the Fantastic Four. They battle the Sentinels. I love that. That's a that's a callback from a panel in Days of Future Past. And this is Banshee here without his powers with Moira McTaggart. But if you're an old school X-Men fan, you really can't go wrong with this. If you want to see Scarlet Witch and Vision, I love this picture of Vision coming up to the ground. That's a throwback to the Avengers 165, I believe, where they're battling Count Nefaria. John Byrne borrowing from that image from that book that he was the penciler on. We've got the Avengers team up with the X-Men. to battle the Sentinels. Master Mold is back in the has been reactivated. Um, and it just goes on and on. And I love this. Reed Richards is doing a little autopsy here of a Sentinel carcass. That's awesome. I love that. I have longed for the days of these to see this again. I mean, I couldn't imagine. Oh man, John Byrne doing a monthly X-Men book again. Could you imagine the sales of that? But like I said, this is basically gonna be his swan song. But yeah, he delves into the Fantastic Four, Franklin Richards. You see Ben Grimm there. You've got some Spider-Man battling the Sentinels. So it's action galore. Spoiler alert, there's also a very brutal battle in this between the X-Men and Magneto. Yes, Magneto has not been forgotten. There is an absolute savage, brutal battle that harkens back to the battle that they had in 1978 when Magneto takes them hostage to his volcano lair. So, anyway, here's the back of the book. You can see Magneto. You've got Xavier contacting the Avengers. The classic event. You've got Beast. Yeah, in this, Beast has left the X-Men to go back to the Avengers. I love it because I love that classic Avengers lineup in the mid 70s, mid to late 70s, where they had, Wonder Man and the Beast, Vision, Scarlet Witch, Yellow Jacket, Wasp. Thor would come and go. You still had Iron Man, Captain America, of course. So anyway, that's a little preview of John Byrne's X-Men Elsewhen. I don't know when the next volumes are coming out, but uh, on a side note, a little bit of controversy about this book that I want to address. There are some current, uh, I don't know, you want to call them, they call themselves comic book creators, but they're not. They're just activists posing as comic book creators. Yes, Heather Antos, I'm talking about you. That's saying they're trying to start a boycott of this release of this book. Of course, it's not happening. It's backfired. This is the number one seller on Amazon. It's already sold out. They're already going to reprint it. This is what actual comic book fans are looking for. This is something that if the mainstream comic book company, if Marvel comic book in particular would go back to this kind of thing. Not I'm not talking about X-Men Elsewhen in particular, but to go back, get some talent, actual talented creators instead of the slop that they are putting out nowadays. Basically, they're hiring no talent activists that are posing as comic book creators. People like Heather Antos, who says, "Oh, don't buy this book. They're releasing this book during Pride Month." Newsflash: the world doesn't revolve around your narcissistic, attention-seeking cults. All right, uh, comic book fans want quality comic books. Well, John Byrne and she's calling for this boycott. Her and among some other people because he's not. He's been outspoken decades ago regarding these identity politics, these ridiculous identity agendas in comic books. Uh, this Pride Month and all of this narcissistic, attention seeking nonsense that has no business in the comic book industry. No one cares. So, ironically enough, John Byrne was the creator of the first openly gay comic book character, uh, North Star of Alpha Flight, and that was back in the late 70s. So John Byrne is a Mount Rushmore level talent in comic book history. One hour 1 hour of John Byrne's professional life has had more impact in comic books than 1,000 lifetimes of people like Heather Antos. Okay. So, yeah, of course, the boycott didn't work. It's already sold out. I was lucky enough to pre-order one a while ago. I just got it in yesterday. Can't wait for volumes 2 and 3, and I'll be right on it. So, anyway, that's X-Men Elsewhen. Let me know what you think about it, and I will be coming back with another comic book commentary video in the future. Thank you.